Welcome to Money Talks. I'm Kathy Yang, your intel on the Philippine markets and the economy. You're looking at a live shot there at the Philippine Statistics Authority, where any moment now, National Statistician Claire Dennis Mapa reveals the April 2026 Labor Force Survey. To recall, joblessness eased to 5% in March from 5.1% in February, despite pressures from the Middle East conflict and higher oil prices. Let's take a listen.
James B. Nino, ang inyong moderator for today's press briefing. Bago natin simulan ang ating press conference, gusto namin ipahayag na ito ay naka-livestream sa PSA Facebook at TikTok pages. Updates are also posted on the PSA X or Twitter with the hashtag PHEmployment. Ikinagagalak ko pong ipakilala si PSA Undersecretary Claire Dennis S. Mapa, National Statistician and Civil Register General, na siyang mag-uulat tungkol sa mga paunang resulta ng Labor Force Survey nitong nakalipas na buwan ng Abril 2026. Ating pakinggan ang report ni Yusek Mapa.
Magandang umaga sa ating lahat. Ang Philippine Statistics Authority mag-uulat ng labor and employment statistics base sa paunang resulta ng Abril 2026 Labor Force Survey. Ang pagkalap ng datos para sa Abril 2026 Labor Force Survey ay ginawa sa loob ng 20 araw mula ika-8 hanggang ika-30 ng Abril nitong taon. Nitong Abril 2026, 45,076 ang total sample households na na-survey ng Philippine Statistics Authority. Samantala, 176,471 naman ang total sample households na na-survey noong Enero 2026 at 44,536 noong Abril ng 2025. Sa populasyon na 15 taong gulang pataas, ang bilang na sa labor force o mga individual na employed o unemployed ay umabot sa 51.30 million nitong Abril 2026. Ito ay mas mataas kumpara sa naitalang bilang noong Abril 2025 na nasa 50.74 million at noong Enero 2026 na nasa 50.89 million. Ang labor force participation rate nitong Abril 2026 ay tinatayang nasa 62.7%. Ito ay mas mababa kumpara sa labor force participation rate noong Abril 2025 na nasa 63.7%, ngunit bahagyang mas mataas kumpara noong Enero 2026 na nasa 62.3%. Nitong Abril 2026, ang bilang ng employed persons o mga nasa labor force na may trabaho o negosyo ay naitala sa 48.89 million. Ito ay mas mataas kumpara noong Abril 2025 na nasa 48.67 million at noong Enero 2026 na nasa 47.94 million. Ang employment rate nitong Abril 2026 ay tinatayang nasa 95.3%. Ito ay bahagyang mas mababa kumpara sa naiulat noong Abril 2025 na nasa 95.9%, ngunit mas mataas naman kung ikukumpara noong Enero 2026 na nasa 94.2%. Ang bilang ng unemployed persons o mga nasa labor force na walang trabaho o negosyo nitong Abril 2026 ay umabot sa 2.41 million. Ito ay tumaas ng 351,000 kaysa naitala noong Abril 2025, ngunit bumaba naman ng 541,000 sa bilang ng unemployed noong Enero 2026. Ang unemployment rate ay tinatayang nasa 4.7% o 47 sa bawat 1,000 na individual na nasa labor force ang walang trabaho o negosyo nitong Abril 2026. Ito ay mas mataas kumpara sa naitalang unemployment rate noong Abril 2025 na nasa 4.1%, ngunit mas mababa naman kumpara noong Enero 2026 na nasa 5.8%. Ang bilang ng underemployed o mga employed na nagpapahayag ng pagnanais na magkaroon ng karagdagang trabaho, karagdagang oras ng trabaho o kaya magkaroon ng bagong trabaho na may mas mahabang oras ay umabot sa 7.41 million nitong Abril 2026. Ito ay mas mataas kumpara sa naitalang bilang ng underemployed noong Abril 2025 na nasa 7.09 million at noong Enero 2026 na nasa 6.35 million. Ang underemployment rate nitong Abril 2026 ay naitala sa 15.2% o 15 sa bawat 100 na individual na may trabaho o negosyo ay underemployed. Ito ay mas mataas kumpara sa naiulat na underemployment rate noong Abril 2025 na nasa 14.6% at noong Enero 2026 na nasa 13.2%. Kung atin namang susuriin ang mga datos ayon sa kasarian ng labor force participation rate ng mga kalalakihan ay umabot sa 73.9% nitong Abril 2026. Ito ay nanatiling mas mataas kumpara sa labor force participation rate ng mga kababaihan na nasa 51.3%. Ang employment rate ng mga kalalakihan ay naitala sa 95.3% nitong Abril 2026. Ito ay bagyang mas mataas kumpara sa employment rate ng mga kababaihan na nasa 95.2%. Samantala, ang unemployment rate ng mga kababaihan ay nasa antas na 4.8% nitong Abril 2026. Ito ay bahagyang mas mataas kumpara sa naitalang unemployment rate ng mga kalalakihan na nasa 4.7%. Sa mga employed na kalalakihan nitong Abril 2026, 16.9% sa kanila ay underemployed. Higit na mas mataas ito kumpara sa underemployment rate ng mga kababaihan na naitala sa 12.7%. Kung atin namang susuriin ang mga datos mula sa riyon ng bansa, ang SOC Sergeant ang nakapagtala ng may pinakamataas na labor force participation rate na nasa 67.1% nitong Abril 2026. Sa kabilang banda, ang Bicol Region ang may pinakamababang labor force participation rate na nasa 57.6%. Siyam na riyon ang nakapagdala ng pagtaas ng labor force participation rate nitong Abril 2026 kumpara noong Enero 2026. Ito ay ang Ilocos Region, Bicol Region, Western Visayas, Negros Island Region, Central Visayas, Zamboanga Peninsula, Davao Region, SOC Sergeant at Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao. Pagdating naman sa employment rate, ang Davao Region ang nakapagdala ng may pinakamataas na employment rate na nasa 97.5%, habang ang Bicol Region naman ay may pinakamababang employment rate na nasa 93.2% nitong Abril 2026. Nitong Abril 2026, sa 18 riyon, 15 ang nakapagtala ng pagtaas ng employment rate. Ito ang mga riyon ng National Capital Region, Cordillera Administrative Region, Ilocos Region, Central Luzon, Calabarzon, Mimaropa Region, Bicol Region, Negros Island Region, Central Visayas, Eastern Visayas, Zamboanga Peninsula, Northern Mindanao, Davao Region, Caraga at Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao. Kung susuriin naman ang unemployment rate mula sa mga riyon, ang Bicol Region ang may pinakamataas na unemployment rate na nasa 6.8%. Samantala, ang Davao Region ang nakapagtala ng may pinakamababang unemployment rate na nasa 2.5% nitong Abril 2026. Tatlong riyon ang nagtala ng pagtaas ng unemployment rate nitong Abril. Ito ang Cagayan Valley, Western Visayas at SOC Sergeant. Pagdating naman sa underemployment rate nitong Abril 2026, ang Western Visayas ang nakapagtala ng may pinakamataas na antas na nasa 31.8%, habang ang Davao Region ang may pinakamababang underemployment rate na nasa 5.6%. Pitong riyon ang
Undersecretary Mapa reporting on the April 2026 Labor Force Survey. To recap, the Philippines' April unemployment rate comes in at 4.7%. This translates to around 2.41 million jobless Filipinos for the month. In other news, at least 37 people have died after a magnitude 7.8 earthquake struck off the coast of Mindanao on Monday. As of 6 a.m. today, Philippine time, the Office of the Civil Defense reported 33 deaths in Socsagen and 4 in the Davao region. Of the total in Region 12, 18 were from Sarangani, 12 from General Santos City, and 3 from South Cotabato. Authorities said the figures are still being validated. The powerful quake struck at 7:37 a.m. Monday off the coast of Sarangani and was traced to movement along the Cotabato Trench. It damaged buildings and critical infrastructure, triggered a landslide in Glan Sarangani, and prompted tsunami warnings across parts of southern Mindanao. President Bongbong Marcos has ordered a full government response, directing concerned agencies to intensify search and rescue operations, deliver immediate relief assistance, and conduct damage assessments in hard-hit communities. Meantime, FIVOC said more than 200 aftershocks have already been monitored, with seismic activity expected to continue for weeks or even months.
Ang inaasahan po natin ay at least po sa mga darating na araw o kaya po ilang linggo, makakaranas po o makaka-record po tayo ng mga aftershocks. Pwede rin pong umawag po ito ng ilang buwan dahil nga po sa lakas ng earthquake na ito. May kakayahan po ito actually na yung pong hindi na sira, nasira po pero hindi na pabagsak nung main shock. Yung mga ganito pong kalakas, mga magnitude 7, kaya pa po niyang dagdagan pa yung damage na yun nga po na na-generate nung main shock.
Motorists face another round of fuel price hikes today, June 9. Sea Oil and other oil companies announced an increase of 30 centavos per liter for gasoline. Diesel prices went up by as much as 5 pesos and 77 centavos per liter, while kerosene rose by 8 pesos and 10 centavos per liter. The price adjustments took effect at 6 a.m. Philippine time. This comes after last week's big-time rollback. Industry sources earlier cited stalled diplomatic talks and prolonged supply disruptions linked to the Middle East conflict as among the factors behind this week's movement. The Energy Department, however, assures the public that the country's fuel inventory remains sufficient for now. The Energy Department's Green Energy Auction program is now on its way for making 35% of our power sources renewable energy, but some challenges brought about by the Middle East conflict. Our mobile journalist, Fatima Baduria, has this report.
As the Philippines continue to grapple with the energy crisis, the government is turning to offshore wind as a power source. While remaining chained to conventional energy sources, the Department of Energy says stronger collaboration among stakeholders is critical to meet renewable energy targets. The DOE's 5th Green Energy Auction Program, or JA5, is now in its infrastructure plan evaluation phase for 9 developers of offshore wind projects who passed the initial review. This is part of the government's efforts to reach the target of having 35% renewable energy share in the country's power source by 2030. Today, it sits at 25%, while coal has 57% share. But the development of offshore wind projects faces challenges.
Building a sustainable and thriving offshore wind ecosystem requires more than just technology alone. It requires collaboration, investment in people, and supportive policies. Now, two of the most requirement or support that is needed is both the transmission line, because they say there will be no transition without transmission. And of course, ports play a critical role in the developing the offshore wind projects.
According to the Philippine Ports Authority, rising prices due to the Middle East conflict has made port upgrades more difficult to finance.
Well, it's a huge problem because if you have identified 6 or 5 ports, we are just identified 2 ports. Because as you all know, I think everybody knows that it's a huge investment for ports to be constructed. We're talking about billions, not just millions.
When offshore wind is established as an industry in the Philippines, the Global Wind Energy Council says it can ultimately lower consumer prices.
When you look at offshore wind, it is anchored in the seabed of the country. There is no fuel to buy, there is no supply to be disrupted, there are no commodity markets to be volatile. It delivers with certainty for up to 30 years through wars, pandemics, and financial crisis.
The DOE currently has 95 auctioned wind projects with a total potential capacity of 72 gigawatts. Meanwhile, the qualified bidders for JA5 are set to be revealed by July 3, with offshore wind projects expected to go online by 2030. Kapatid, Fatima Baduria, We Are One News.
Joining us is Nomura's chief ASEAN economist, Yuben Paracuelles, who's been monitoring the labor force survey data released from his Singapore office. It's good seeing you again, Yuben. Welcome back to the program.
Hey, morning, Kathy, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, unemployment rates come in 4.7%, but underemployment rose to 7.41 million. And this is a month in to the Middle East conflict. What do you make of the results, Yuben?
Yeah, in terms of the overall unemployment rate decline compared to January, that's a little bit encouraging, and I would say somewhat surprising given the the situation in the Middle East and the impact on the domestic economy already. But just not having seen yet the details, but I would reckon that the improvement is partly because of the turnaround in government spending. So as I've noted in a report earlier, non-interest government expenditures have picked up already after being negative in terms of growth for a good part of last year and early this year as well. So there is a little bit of a turnaround, and spending has kicked back in, and maybe some projects are already coming on stream, and that's creating a little bit more of employment opportunities and some spillovers potentially into some of the related private sector players.
Yeah, but we got another variable here to consider on Philippine jobs. It's China. I mean, Nomura's recent work flags the Philippines as one of the most vulnerable in Asia to a wave of cheaper Chinese exports. Where exactly do you see the biggest pressure points in terms of jobs? Is it in garments, electronics, auto parts?
Yeah, Kathy, I think this is a long-term problem. It's not going to show up immediately in the unemployment numbers. So we call this at Nomura some interconnected shifts that's happening in Asia. So you mentioned China shock. We're now in version 2.0 actually, because this could be worse than what we've seen a few years back. So what we're essentially seeing is there's a lot of excess capacity, industrial capacity in China, and of course with the trade tensions with the U.S., that excess capacity is needing to find markets elsewhere. And Southeast Asia has been a recipient of that, but unfortunately for some of these smaller countries, what that means is it's not just disinflationary pressure, but also strong competitive pressures, even for manufacturing and labor-intensive sectors, right? So we put that together in a scorecard in that report across Asian countries, and together with Indonesia and Thailand, Philippines come out on top of that vulnerability scorecard. In contrast, Malaysia and places like India look a little bit more resilient.
Now, prior to the China shock, Yuben, I know you'd already warned that the Philippines was at risk of stagflation this year. That's weak growth with still above target inflation. How has that core story evolved with a slower than forecast or expected May inflation print? We've seen headline CPI falling back to 6.8%.
Yeah, I think it's still a risk, but I would say since the last we spoke, that risk has kind of eased off a little bit. So as I said before, growth is looking like it's on an improving trajectory because of a return of fiscal spending. But then in terms of inflation, if as you said, the May print was actually surprising to the downside. I did not expect actually a very strong pickup. I was only forecasting a mild increase to 7.3, but even that was much higher than the actual 6.8. So this is really a reprieve in the sense that this is because of the drop in retail fuel prices. And our assumption from here, even at on average Brent crude at 98, the trajectory is such that we're expecting a sort of a stabilization, if not a further decline in fuel prices. So on a headline basis, I've actually revised my forecast for CPI. So I was at 6.1 for the full year. I brought it back down to 5.5. Again, based on these factors. But what I would note is CPI inflation has likely peaked, but not core inflation. So if you strip out energy and food, there are still certain items in the core basket that's driving core inflation higher. I think that is going to play out for the next few months. And again, this is partly because of the quick pass-through from still elevated energy prices, even though declining, to items that are sensitive to energy inputs, things like restaurants and accommodation and the like. So I think that's still going to play out in the next few months. And keeping core inflation rising instead of before it starts peaking maybe in Q4. So yeah, BSB will have to stay on guard.
Okay, final point. Are you going to go for 25 or 50, and is it happening on June 18 or before?
Yeah, I've always been of the view that BSP will keep a measured approach. And with this drop in headline CPI reading, I think that doesn't require an aggressive increase in the pulse rate. But then, of course, at these levels, it's still very much above the 2 to 4% target of BSP. So I think they'll still have to continue with the hiking cycle. So I'm going with 25, and I don't think they're going to do anything on the off cycle. We're not too far away from June 18. Yeah, like I said, the headline inflation reprieve is going to reduce the risk of them going more aggressive.
All right, we'll keep tabs to 25 then. Thank you so much for joining us. You've been Paracuelias of Nomura live in Singapore. And you're watching Money Talks. Coming up, we'll take a look at the situation in General Santos City following a magnitude 7.8 quake. And a new documentary series is set to bring the stories of Filipino soldiers to the forefront. Keep it here on One News. Sure. Is that Ivan? Ivan, good morning. Magandang umaga. Kamusta ka dyan?
Hi, Miss Cathy.
Kailan
Okay
ka
naman
dumating?
po. Kagabi po.
Kagabi. Okay, was everything okay or may aftershocks?
Well, so far, wala naman pong aftershocks na nararamdaman. Just yung mga infrastructures just
Got that.
destroyed lang.
Anong location mo? Lagyan ka namin locator.
Jensen po.
Welcome back to Money Talks. I'm Kat Yang. One of our top stories, the reported death toll from the magnitude 7.8 earthquake in Mindanao hits 37. Let's check the situation on the ground with our mobile journalist Evan Tarinque live from General Santos City. So, kamusta na ang sitwasyon dyan, Evan?
Cathy, bakas pa rin nga yung matinding epekto ng magnitude 7.8 na lindol dito sa General Santos City. Maraming mga gusali ang mga nagtamo ng pinsala habang libu-libong mga residente ang patuloy na humaharap sa hamon na dulot ng sakuna. Sa pinakahuling talanga ng City Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Office o CDRMO, umabot na sa 66 ang mga gusali ng sira dahil sa malakas na pagyanig. Pinakamarami sa mga ito ang mga paaralan na merong 14 na strukturang nagtamo ng pinsala. 13 naman ang naitalang nasawi, habang 144 ang nasugatan at 4 pa ang patuloy na pinaghahanap ng mga otoridad. According to CDRMO, nasa 1,830 families rin ang naapektuhan ng lindol. Patuloy naman nakahanda ang mga rescuer para sa mga sinasagawang search and rescue operation para sa mga nawawalang individual. Samantala, ayon sa ilang mga residente na aming nakausap, nararanasan pa rin nila ang mga kakulangan sa supply ng kuryente at malinis na tubig. Inaasahan nila na baka sa mga ilang araw pa bago muling maibalik ang mga pangunahing serbisyong ito, nakahanda na rin ang mga relief goods ng DSWD na naka-imbak sa kanilang field office. At inaasahang ipapamahagi ang mga ito sa mga apektadong pamilya sa mga susunod na oras. Kasi inaasahan na mamaya mag-i-inspect si DPWH Secretary Vince Dizon sa iba't iba pang mga struktura na nasira, gaya nga nung sa may San Jose Tibuli Road at sa may sa General Santos yan, at iba pang mga struktura na nasira dahil nga dun sa epekto ng paglindol. Kathy?
Okay, maaliwalas ang panahon pero mag-ingat po kayo dyan. Our mobile journalist, Evan Tarinque, reporting live from General Santos City. And a quick check on the Philippine peso. Let's see how that's open this Tuesday. It is a tad stronger, 61.65 to the dollar. The local currency fell by 22 centavos on Monday to close at 61.69 against the greenback. Preliminary Bangko Sentral data showed the country's gross international reserves stood at nearly $104 billion at the end of May. This was the lowest GIR level since January of last year. And the local stock market fell back to the 5,800 level Monday as escalating tensions in the Middle East weighed on investor sentiment. PSCI fell by about 1% to close at 5,879. The broader all shares index likewise ended lower, while all sectoral gauges closed in the red. Meanwhile, the 10-year government bond yields inched up to 7.532% from the previous close of 7.529%. And before we go, a new documentary series is set to bring the stories of Filipino soldiers to the forefront. Mobile journalist Jazz Paredes tells us more.
Second Lieutenant Mateo Guidicelli continues to prove that patriotism goes beyond words. Apart from being a Philippine Army reservist, he has consistently demonstrated his commitment to serving the country. Now, Mateo embarks on another significant mission, bridging the world of public influence and public service.
This advocacy started approximately 7 years ago when I joined the Philippine Army and I went through the Scout Ranger orientation course. After that day, I said to myself, I promise and I vow to tell the story of every single soldier.
Now, Mateo is fulfilling that promise. In a ceremonial partnership signing, Mateo, Signal, and the Armed Forces of the Philippines formalized a collaboration that aims to bring the stories of Filipino soldiers to a wider audience. The agreement paves the way for the launch of Patriots, a documentary series that brings viewers closer to the real-life experiences of the men and women of the AFP. Patriots with Mateo Guidicelli is a first-of-its-kind docu-anthology series that shines a light on the courage, sacrifice, duty, and heroism of Filipino soldiers. Present during the signing ceremony were MQuest Holdings President Victor Rico P. Vargas and AFP Chief of Staff General Romeo S. Bronner Jr.
Why did we do this? It's good timing. I think it's good timing that we show our fellow Filipinos unheard of heroes, people who die for the country, heroes that make us proud, heroes that we don't know, and their stories to uplift the current situation and to see what real love for country is.
We have a very rich military history. We have a very rich military heritage. And sayang naman kung hindi natin maipamahagi, lalong-lalo na po sa mga kabataan.
During a preview of the series teaser, several AFP personnel were featured, including Major Juliza May Beran, Colonel Andrew Bacala, Sergeant Antonino Basa, Captain Earl June Atuch, Major Jerome Hacuba, Colonel Francel Margaret Padilla, Major Bala Tamayo, Major Gestoni Labarosa, and General Alberto Macayrol. Each story highlights their grit, determination, and sacrifices as they dedicate their lives to defending the country's sovereignty and protecting the Filipino people.
The teaser is awesome, it's cool, very emotional, but I'm looking forward to see a lot of them and telling more stories and doing more, kumbaga. Kasi marami pa mga kwento na kailangan sabihin at sana padaan-dahan magagawa natin. General Browner said, sana isang bata will say, "Uy, pa, ma, gusto kong maging sundalo."
Mateo also looks forward to featuring more AFP personnel in future episodes, including pilots, combat medics, doctors, and engineers. Patriots with Mateo Guidicelli will premiere on June 13 at 6 p.m. exclusively on One News. Kapatid Jazz Paredes, we are One News.
Looking forward to watching Patriots this weekend on this channel. That is it for Money Talks. I'm Kathy Yang. Catch us again tomorrow, 9 a.m. Have a great day ahead.